Hey listeners, if you've been listening to our show, chances are you've heard the wonderful contributions of our favorite Tolkien scholar, Marilyn R. Pukila. Marilyn just launched her own podcast on our network called Rings and Rituals.
Join me and Dr. Sarah Brown on our journey through the Lord of the Rings of Power, through the lens of ritual. Episodes drop every other Wednesday on the Rings and Rituals feed, linked in the show notes. See you there.
Hey everybody, David here. If you've not already been listening, I wanted to invite you to check out Properly Howard Movie Review. I genuinely love this podcast, and we wanted to make sure that folks had a chance to listen to it and enjoy the hilarity that ensues when Anthony and Steve get on the microphone together. You may already know Anthony from his Electric Boogaloo podcast. That's the podcast where Anthony's going chapter by chapter through all of the George R. Martin Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones books. The content is a little bit more serious on that podcast. You know, it's a little bit weightier and heavier. So I really enjoy it when he and Steve get together because it's an absolute giggle fest. Properly Howard is an affiliate of the Lorehounds, and we do our best to support and promote each other as part of our association. And I absolutely adore the Properly Howard format. Steve and Anthony pick a theme for their season, and then they choose around 10 or so older movies to do reviews on. If you were wondering what the podcast name refers to, it's their ranking system. They grade every movie on a scale relative to the average Ron Howard movie. Thus, a movie is better, worse, or properly Howard. This season's theme is Felonies and Fugazies, which I absolutely love as a category. So what we've done is we've taken the second episode from their current season and we're dropping it in here on our main feed so that everyone gets a chance to hear what an average episode sounds like. This particular podcast is about the 1988 movie Shakedown, starring Peter Weller and Sam Elliott. They just covered Point Break, and next up is Tango and Cash, which should be dropping right after this. Check the show notes for a link to the webpage that has a listing for this season's titles. We've created a special Notion page that has all the movies, the log lines, links to trailers, and as well, when a movie gets reviewed, we'll post and update the relative Ron Howard ranking scales. So be sure to subscribe to their feed and keep up with the season. And definitely go back a couple of episodes to listen to their draft, their film draft of how they ended up with this wacky set of titles. Oh, one other important detail. You absolutely do not have to watch any of these movies to enjoy the podcast. Steve and Anthony are hilarious on their own. Remember that we've got a channel set up for them in our Discord server. So join us over there to carry on the conversation, share your thoughts about the movies and the podcast in general. Check out the show notes below to get a link to their feed, or just search for Properly Howard in your podcast application of choice and subscribe today.
Hello, Properly Howard fans. Before we get to our coverage of Shakedown, our affiliates at the Lorehounds have created a website to follow our comings and goings this season. Here to talk about it for a couple of minutes is David from the Lorehounds. I've got David from Lorehound fame with me this morning. David, tell me what's going on with the Lorehounds right now.
Oh, we're a little busy catching up. We've been hanging in with Shogun, which has been a phenomenal series of television. And we're getting ready for a bumper crop this summer with House of the Dragon, The Bear, Acolyte. There was something else I can't remember off the top of my head. So yeah, it's been good. And we onboarded a new podcast for Fallout, one of our really super active Discord users, Aaron, who is also one of our moderators. He roped in a buddy of his, Chase, and they've been podcasting about Fallout. It's called Radioactive Ramblings. So that's really fun. Marilyn's been busy with Rings and Rituals with her and Dr. Sarah Brown. So yeah, we've got a fun little family rolling along here. We're sponsoring a bunch of other podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm happy to be at least, a cousin of the family.
My cousin,
but
hey.
I wanted to ask you, now you did something very kind for Properly Howard. You created a Notion page for us.
Yes.
And I'm really impressed with it. we're about the same age. There are old dads who know about technology, and then there are people like me who eschew technology wherever we can. But I was really impressed with this Notion page. Tell me a little bit about this and why you created it.
Sure. For Properly Howard, I didn't plan it because I'm just a genuine fanboy of Properly Howard. I love the format.
But you seemed especially excited about Felonies and Fugazies, maybe more so than the other seasons of Properly Howard.
I thought the title was great, and it just made me think of all those really sort of Goodfellas era type, movies.
Yeah.
And so I was listening to your draft. I was like, oh, well, we gotta write it. I gotta write this down. I gotta see where it goes. So I just started throwing it into Notion. And then I just, out of that, built this little gallery where you can go to the page, and this is available for everyone. You don't have to be a subscriber or anything.
All right.
And there's a title.
We'll put a link in the show notes of this particular episode. All right. So you'll go to that page, and at the very minimum, you'll be able to see which movies we're covering.
Correct.
Right. So, which is something that Steve and I have not been great about. So I appreciate that.
It's very helpful. And so I put them in order. So when you land on the page, you'll see them running in left to right order.
Uh-huh.
You see a thumbnail of I tried to find original movie posters for them, either, digital reproductions or people have scanned them. There is the log line, so you can see what the movie's about. And then there's also tags for the year, who picked the movie, and then your categories for unlikely partners or
right. Yeah. Which category the movie falls into according to our draft, right?
Yep. So then if you click on the tile, it'll open up a little side page and you can see all that information. But then I also embedded links for IMDb and Letterboxd. So if people want to follow through a little bit more.
Nice.
And then I'm starting to record your Properly Howard ratings.
Oh, that's very good.
So on Point Break.
This all sounds so official. I'm so happy that you stepped into the void here.
What I'm also doing is once the podcast drops, I will embed the podcast in there, but I've also embedded the trailers. So if you click through and you're curious, like, oh, do I really want to watch this film or whatever, you can then also see the trailer quite quickly. And then I've also added links. If somebody's a Plex user, Plex is a online streaming kind of platform thing. And if they have trouble finding the original movie, there's a way to request Plex access to see the movie.
Now, I wanted to ask you, David, since we're covering Felonies and Fugazies, what do you think is missing from this particular list that you would like to see on this list?
I think something from the genre of the heavy-duty mobster category. So a Goodfellas, a Casino.
I think that those are really good ones. I guess we didn't really do a hard-hitting mafia kind of movie on this list. And I think that's absolutely an oversight. Thank you for mentioning that. I think that sometimes with this podcast, we try to go for hidden gems. Not always, it's like, I did go Pulp Fiction, which should be coming up for us. But
Rocky, that's an epic movie.
Right, but you wouldn't think of Rocky as a crime movie usually. So yeah, maybe we're erring on not too many of the deep cuts and not enough of the the greatest hits. Mm-hmm. So okay, that's good. Now, which is your favorite of those kinds of movies?
I think Goodfellas is just such a great historical overview of mafia history in modern history, and it's got such compelling characters, and it's got such a pacing. And then when you hit that final chapter of it and just the speed at which it's rolling forward, it's a movie that really carries me. And I can just think of the scenes and I smile, or I'm like, wow.
Yeah, it is absolutely one of these movies that you can watch 50 times.
Yeah.
and
there's
enjoy
so much
every
richness
time
to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question before we bounce out? What is the ending music for Properly Howard? Because I honestly listen all the way through because I love that song. I get a pep in my step every time.
It's a great song. It's a great song. It is the intro music to the film The Taking of Pelham 123.
Oh.
The original.
The original.
And
Okay.
For me, it connotes a particular era in movie making.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Gritty.
And just that robust horn section, the percussiveness of the song. I just get pumped every single time I hear that song.
I do too. Genuinely.
It comes from a particular era of movie making that I think is passed us by.
Absolutely.
But it's a banger of a song for sure.
I'm so glad that you have it.
What about my friend, Nick? Fix you out, bro.
Welcome to Properly Howard, a podcast that reviews classic films and other pulp fiction. Today we take a look at the 1988 action crime thriller Shakedown. Shakedown is part gritty cop story, part courtroom drama, and part live-action Looney Tunes cartoon. Peter Weller stars as a tenor sax-playing lawyer with bad taste in ties who works alongside Sam Elliott, who plays a no-nonsense cop with a history of involuntary dog slaughter, and he is not afraid to weaponize a roller coaster. With me to discuss this film, as always, is Dr. Anthony Ladon.
Steve, does anyone sit at a bar like Sam Elliott?
Nobody can. I mean, we all try, right? I mean, I think it's funny because there are those who have seen Sam Elliott in a movie sitting at a bar, and there are those that don't, and that shows anytime you go to a bar. Anyone that's sitting straight up, or anyone that's just kind of just looking like a regular, just an average Joe, they've never seen. Because as soon as you see it, you're like, oh, that's what you got to do. I got to do a slight hunch, cock the head just a little bit to the left, a wry smirk. Act as if you have a mustache, you know. I wipe away, beer from a mustache. It's non-existent.
For those who do not know Sam Elliott, what has he been in? What would they know him from?
Flannel.
He's one of these actors where like everyone's seen him in a movie, and he's always pretty memorable, but for some reason, he's not like a household name. He's one of these guys. He was the guy in The Big Lebowski. No, not Goodman, not Buscemi. He's the other guy. So what do you think is his most memorable role?
That's a really interesting question because I actually had a conversation with somebody about Sam Elliott, and it's like, what is his most memorable role? Like, what is he known for? I mean, like he's been in some big films, and he's had a real, a prominent effect on a lot of those films. Like, he's in Roadhouse, for example, and Mask, and Tombstone.
He's the hippie boyfriend. He shares hippie boyfriend in Mask, right?
Right. He's
in Tombstone. He's the older, deep voiced brother in Tombstone.
Yeah. He's sort of this figure of wisdom in The Big Lebowski.
Oh yeah, he's the narrator, and yeah. I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm.
He was famously in a really great episode of Parks and Rec,
right?
Where he's the liberal equivalent to Ron
Swanson.
Yeah. He's sort of like the yin to Swanson's yang. That was a great role for him, but he's not usually cast as the lead, right? He's more of
unless it was the man who killed Hitler and then the Bigfoot.
Oh, I didn't see that one. All right, so he was the lead in that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think people know who we're talking about. So even in this film, he's kind of second banana, right?
Yeah, and kind of surprisingly so, because the cover of the film would have you believe that it's sort of a 1A 1B, right?
Yeah.
With Peter Weller, he is. I mean, he's the closest thing to the next biggest actor, and with screen time and everything. But it's interesting how maybe infrequently their paths cross. Like a lot of the stuff they do is without each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they do get together, it's usually pretty comically cartoonish.
It's a mayhem. I was trying to describe this film. I was like, it's like an episode of LA Law with a Jackie Chan movie peppered in at times.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I mean it's a lot of genres.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of fitting into our Felonies and Fugazies crime series here, but it really almost is a courtroom drama with
right at times for sure
with the movie Scarface.
Yeah, right.
Merged, overlaid with the movie Scarface, overlaid with the movie Heat, overlaid with a bunch of Jackie Chan action sequences.
Yeah,
it's got some heavy saxophone when the love story's coming in.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, I mean it's a great everything. The sax is definitely there, so you get a little Lethal Weapon.
Sure, yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's the movie. The movie assumes you know a lot of things, like the relationship between these two characters. Like it just assumes you would just know that there's this lawyer who's really wants to be a tenor sax player. But he got into law because he was convinced that he wasn't really going to make a living playing tenor sax exclusively.
His family, his father and his family thought he was a loser.
Yeah,
because it was you're never going to make any money playing tenor sax.
But like he never feels quite himself like he does when he's playing tenor sax.
He could just play it forever. That's
forever.
What he wants to do.
Yeah.
But that is not the New York he's living in. The New York he's living in is not going to reward him for playing the tenor sax.
No, and he doesn't play it at all in this movie, which really shows his how distant he is from his passion. And then he just sort of knows Samuel Elliott's character and knows that he sleeps in a movie theater. Lives in a movie theater, brushes his teeth in a movie theater with baking soda.
I was going to ask you about that. So this guy, this is the Elliott character. His name's Richie. He's a cop, and at least a pretty successful cop. At least because he's not wearing street blues. He's wearing blue jeans.
It's very important to note the blue jeans.
That's right.
Which, by the way, this movie internationally is known as Blue Jean Cop.
I saw that. He's from Texas, so he's kind of an outsider to the force. And, he goes and fishes in the East River on his off hours. I don't know where he's going to cook these fish because he lives in a movie theater. So
right. You just throw that in there with the popcorn if you get a chance.
Fish corn?
That's right. He invented popcorn shrimp, essentially.
Do the fish come out of the East River already cooked?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what he's fishing for is edible to begin with.
So he does what I will do, and that is I will fall asleep during the action sequence. I don't know what it is about these movies that, like, you think it was like the lull, when it's really quiet and pondering, I would fall asleep.
Right.
But it's usually like if there's 4 or 5 punches in a row, I'm out like a light. And I guess this guy is sleeping to an action sequence in one of the director's previous movies. So
The Exterminator, right?
the Exterminator. But he's sleeping through an action sequence, and I thought I like that. That's me. That's exactly what I'm going to do in a movie theater. But he seems to live there,
At least temporarily.
and I'm just assuming like he decided he wanted to be a cop in New York City for some reason, and maybe he didn't fit in Texas. I don't know. For all I know, he was a bad cop in Texas, and he thought, I need to go to New York where everyone's a bad cop. Then he gets there, and maybe rent is too high, do you think?
Then higher than when he's in New York? Yeah, I mean...
He gets to New York City, he gets the job as the corrupt police officer. The rent is just too high.
Well, my understanding is that he's in a relationship, and he's on the outs right now. And that's as Roland comes in and tells him, I forget exactly the name. Says so said, if you're willing to, you can go back. If you're willing to, own up to. And then he's like, "It's what you got to look forward to," because because Roland's engaged, and so Richie Marx is letting Roland know that this is his fate if he decides to get married.
Mm-hmm. So I've got a little something I want to play you, and I think you're going to like this a lot.
Rained like hell that day. I had an umbrella. Moving back to her apartment, she went to the bathroom. I sat on the couch. She had this great big damn dog. The dog had a ball. I threw it. The dog brought it back. I threw it again, harder. I'll never forget the sound of that dog's paws on the newly waxed floors. How was I supposed to know she left the window open? The dog fell 13 stories, landed on top of a parked car. I went over, leaned out the window, looked down, threw up, and left. Without ever telling her she was the one.
It's an amazing sequence to really think about and to parse. For one, it's like it was their first date, and he was going to tell her she was the one. So maybe he dodged a bullet, right? I mean, also she's pooping, right? I mean, like she's gone for a long time. I mean, they go in, she goes to the bathroom. He makes it very clear that's where she is, and then he's on the couch. He plays fetch twice. A dog going down 13 stories is takes a little bit. And he gets up and throws up, and I would have loved it if at that point, if he was just like in an alternate universe, he's like, you know what, dog be damned, I'm going to let her know she's the one, even with little chunder and mustache.
So I like to think of this from the woman's perspective. They meet at Shakespeare.
She's telling a very different story, by the way, to her friends.
She meets him at Shakespeare in the Park.
Mm-hmm.
He says he's a lawyer.
Right.
It's raining.
Already off to a good start. Lying to her.
For some reason, everyone loves lawyers in this town. So then he goes back. They go back to her apartment. She goes into the bathroom for maybe it's a little while, but it's not going to seem as long to her, right?
Sure.
She's got to just get done what she needs to get done. She comes out. There's barf all over her floor. The lawyer's gone. The window's open. And she looks down and sees her dog splattered on a parked car.
All right.
This is a pretty bad first date for her. And she's probably wondering, like, what did I do? Like, what?
She's like, I thought I was the one. If only he would have verbalized it.
What did I do wrong to deserve this kind of response? I thought he liked me.
So good. And I love it because this is like, the story's being told in the midst of a lot of really interesting stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of activity going on. And again, I'm like, how do these guys know each other? I mean, because he picks him up at the movie theater just so like matter of fact, like, all right, well, it's time to get my down on his luck cop friend around, and who knows, maybe we'll get him to shoot him up on a motorcycle.
So they're in a bar, and I think that they're trying to trade stories about like how the world's a hard place, right?
Right. Yeah. One guy says, "I wish I could play saxophone more," and the other one's like, "I killed a dog," and it's like, all right, well, I mean, we're peeling back some layers.
Later in this movie, they're going to come face to face with the Shocker from Spider-Man. He literally shocks people to death. Like, there's some horrible stuff going on in New York City. You know,
New York's wild.
The cops are dirty. There's crack on every corner. Even, you know, you can't even get a place to rent. You gotta sleep in the movie theater. This guy is haunted by the dog that went out the window.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is, it's like really the biggest regret is not telling her she was the one. See, I think the dog is up there higher for me. Like there's a woman I just met that I didn't get a chance to say I was really smitten with, but there's also a dog I just met that I killed.
I love the detail about the barf.
Yeah, the barf is great. I mean, the cadence of that story is you learn so much about this individual in that little story. And like, this is the kind of scene that would be deleted in many other like action crime dramas. But this one, I'm like, forget it. You build the whole movie around this. I could watch those. If the movie was just Boilermakers with Elliott, I mean, I'm in.
So you would think that
we spent a lot of time talking about this one sequence in this movie, and this movie is bonkers all the way around it.
I want to ask you, because I feel like I would have liked this movie if it had more Sam Elliott in it. But Peter Weller is pretty impressive in this movie. And I want to ask you this question. Do you think that he's too good of an actor for this movie? Well,
that's okay. So Peter Weller is an interesting case too, right? So like we just talked about, Sam Elliott and what he brings, and maybe not often a leading man, but always adds a certain gravitas and a certain something, right? But then you have Peter Weller, who has a kind of an odd little filmography himself, right? I mean, he's Buckaroo Banzai, and he shows up in a lot of kind of odd flicks. Sometimes they tend to be a little bit more, maybe feels a little more artsy at times, but then other times like kind of schlocky. Mm-hmm. So it's like he seems like he's a guy that like is often asked maybe to elevate something that might otherwise be maybe not taken as seriously, perhaps.
You think that's the same with RoboCop?
Well, RoboCop, what smartly they do with RoboCop is like, even though there was all this talk about like, oh, do we get Schwarzenegger? Do we get somebody big like that? Taking kind of like Weller can do the everyday man kind of thing, right? He can kind of be your average Joe, but still adding a sense of elegance to the performance. Like in RoboCop, I mean, he has, he's kind of this charming, aw shucks cop in a way in the beginning. Like not like cheesily done, but he just like I find it in a movie where he's so there's so little of him as a full human in it. He does a lot with those scenes. I think like he makes. I've always found Murphy to be very sympathetic, but not
I was impressed by that performance in that movie. I was because I think I'm kind of a late to the Weller party. Mm-hmm. I don't think I really appreciated him. But what he did with RoboCop, which was otherwise a pretty standard action movie, with big action set pieces and outlandish scenes. The villains in the movie are over the top. And then you've got this really interesting, subtle performance by Weller. And I almost feel like that might be the same thing in this movie.
Yeah, there's... I was actually pretty impressed, because I've only seen this movie once, I think like close to when it first came out. And but it always stuck with me. Like a lot of the scenes stuck with me. So it was kind of a nice surprise to revisit it and realize, wow, the scenes that stuck with me I was always surprised when they showed up, because the movie doesn't present itself like this kind of movie that's going to have death by roller coaster. It doesn't, where Sam Elliott, instead of going down the stairs, he jumps on like a light pole that then falls down onto a bus. And then he jumps onto a motorcycle with a sidecar to knock them off. And at that same time, Peter Weller, who took the stairs, shows up right there and gets on the back of the motorcycle.
No, Sam Elliott does not like the stairs. He doesn't mind going upstairs. He just doesn't ever want to go down a flight of stairs.
Apparently.
He would rather take the storm drain and destroy property on the way down.
Unbelievable. But that scene just like, cause it goes from like, everything just seems like sort of like, I'm kind of into it. I mean, there's definitely an interesting directing style that feels a little, it's hard to describe. Like it feels like a throwback in many ways. Like it does feel like if you told me this movie was made in the 70s, and there's a certain grittiness to the direction style early on, and especially the dynamic between, the crack dealer and the police. And so I kind of like, I'm kind of digging in for something here. And then it's like, then there's this very odd bust of this underground, very high-end crack den.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of stuff going down in that den.
And you need grenades to get in.
Yeah. Well,
yellow grenades.
I like the trope with, the trunk opens and who's ever responsible for the weaponry says, "Do you see anything you like?"
Yeah.
Richie just looks at the array of possible weapons. He takes 2 grenades, 2 bright yellow grenades.
Yeah, bright yellow grenades. Really interesting.
All right, so that is in the same movie that has this scene.
Of course not. I already said I wasn't there, but it's obvious what happened.
No, I submit to you that it is not obvious what happened. It is not obvious, but it is fair to say that you assumed what happened because you were not there, Officer Varelli, and you did not see what happened.
Right. I already said that. Right.
And your assumption was that Patrick O'Leary, in the middle of a narcotics arrest, was shot by Michael Jones. But since you were not there, you could assume anything. You could assume, as a matter of fact, that maybe Patrick O'Leary shot himself. Or maybe you could assume, because you were not there, that Patrick O'Leary did not identify himself as a police officer because his badge was not out. And you could assume, Officer Varelli, that Patrick O'Leary pulled his gun out first and shot Michael Jones, planning to kill him and steal his money and his drugs.
Objection!
Could you assume that, Officer Varelli?
Bullshit.
Mr. Dalton, you will please approach the bench.
So this is a courtroom drama.
Yeah, there's actually several scenes that are actually kind of gripping.
And it's actually like they're almost going for something close to realism in the courtroom drama. It's like he's a pretty good courtroom lawyer and he's trying to submit evidence. And then, of course, he's bringing the evidence too late to the party. For some reason, the street crane that attaches itself to the taxi that hovers him over the courthouse and then drops him on the step of the courthouse. Like, that's not over the top, but as soon as he goes in the courthouse, the judge is like, we're not going to submit this. This is ridiculous.
That's why I think this movie is pretty freaking amazing, right? It'll go from, like I said, it goes from the verdict to, like Super Cop.
Yeah.
And then back to the verdict again. Like, he goes, there's this big tip about this evidence, right? There's this whole scene where Sam Elliott's character gets tipped off by like kind of a scared, on the beat cop, right?
Yeah.
And tells him, hey, no, there's evidence that will show, that the cop is dirty on the take or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole thing, right? So finds out about it, and he goes, and Peter Weller goes to get it, and the cops, because they're all against him, even if they're not necessarily on the take, which some clearly are, he's also defending what they see as a cop killer, right? So he's like, he's public enemy number one in a police precinct.
Yeah, so he tries to break in. They catch him. Well, so and then they torture him and play Russian roulette with his forehead.
Right. And then they decide, okay, well, we're just gonna kill him. We're just gonna kill him right here in the precinct until Samuel Elliott is told where he is by the guy who wants to kill him.
He busts in, he shoots the cops.
Yeah.
Then he jumps in a cab. Peter Weller jumps in a cab. The cab driver knows his constitution. Mm-hmm. He loves America, so he's going to get that. He's going to get this
little
lawyer.
wacky immigrant trope.
He's going to get the lawyer to the court on time. There's a car chase that ends with a construction crane that lifts the cab over the crowd, drops it onto the courtroom steps. He runs in, and the judge is like, no, we're not going to submit this into evidence. It's too late. Let's hear your closing arguments, counselor.
That whole entire sequence that included a crane happening to hit the windshield of a taxi, and then instead of being like, oops, this is a real problem, lifts him up over the police barricade so that he can now have some sort of safety by being on the courthouse steps, which I don't know the law real well, but I didn't know that if a police officer has a gun to somebody after getting craned over a police barricade after a police chase, that a judge can say, you're in charge of the law on the streets, but on these courthouse steps, I am the law. And then I'll have my wacky bailiff keep an eye on this massive team of crooked cops. And the other part of it is, I'm like, well, he's not even on the steps. He's still like, a good block away. So I'm not really sure. But I watched that scene over and over again, and I was like, how and who was the crane guy working with? You're like, oh no, that was an accident.
I like to think that was the cousin of the cab driver, maybe.
I mean, it's a crazy sequence. It's this massively orchestrated sequence that at the end, that starts from him getting the tip off about the tape, to trying to get the tape, to stealing the tape, to getting beat up and getting ready to be killed, to getting craned over a police barricade, only to find out that that was for nothing.
It was for nothing because that tape was not submitted improperly into evidence. So this is the same movie that just used a crane to get him to the court on time. That movie has the sensibility to say, no, there are rules.
See, and I think what it is this goes to show, this movie is showing you, look, we have a judicial system. It may not be perfect, but it is set up by a set of rules, right? It is set up by this set of rules, and then you try to follow these rules, and then sometimes those rules get in the way of justice being served. But out there on the streets, it's mayhem. Out there on the streets, you know what? You're looking for order. Well, good luck. Sometimes you need a serendipitous crane to get through life, but you can't plan for it. You can't adjust for it. You just have to react to it. So ultimately, this whole movie is the two ways you can play tenor sax. Right? You can play it note for note, and you can be polished. You may not be the lead in a band, but you definitely will probably have a nice little backing role. However, if you want to really play tenor sax, you got to be willing to play jazz. You got to be willing to hit those off notes. You got to be willing to improvise. You got to be. That's why what we see. Look, he wants to get into the insurance game because that's safer. That's tenor sax played note by note. This man is jazz, baby. And that's the world he needs to live in. Sam Elliott weaponizes a roller coaster.
Right. As a guy with a knife comes at him and runs away, he decides he's going to immediately get on top of a roof. He's not going to chase him directly. He's going to get on top of a roof at Coney Island.
He likes his heights, man. He likes his heights.
And go up a roller coaster, break the engine of the roller coaster so that the guy... so that the roller coaster flies off of the tracks. Is this film trying to tell me something about like the system being corrupt? Because at the end of the day, nothing really changes. Like a couple bad guys get blown up in a plane, right?
Yeah, and Sam Elliott almost causes 9/11. That's nuts, man. That ending sequence, if you were to watch the first 30 minutes of this movie, right?
Yeah.
And then you watch the last 5 minutes of this movie, you're like, what happened? How did we get here? It's crazy. First 30 minutes, we've got dirty cops, we've got courtroom stuff, and then the last sequence, Sam Elliott is hanging on the landing gear of a private jet over the city of New York, shooting it while he's hanging on it, and they almost hit one of the World Trade Centers, but they narrowly avert it. And then he takes one of his golden grenades.
Did
that
he have
never
the
leaves
grenade
the house
in his pocket the whole time?
I guess so. I don't know if he keistered that grenade, but he throws that in there, jumps into the water, and they land and explode. I don't know. This movie is so funny. Like I watched it, and then I went back and I watched several scenes over and over and over again. That one being one of them. The dog story for sure. All right. And but it never refers back. It's like he just like Peter Weller's not like, wow, that was crazy. I can't believe that just happened to me. It's like, well, got to go to court and cheat on my fiance, I guess.
So, all right. Most of the time with crime dramas, it'll be some commentary on like the cops have to become monsters to fight the monsters on the street. Or it's, hey, cops, robbers, not that different at the end of the day. Or, hey, these criminals have honor. And maybe they even have more honor than the police officers. Or maybe it's like, look how dark the system is. Look how fundamentally corrupt this entire system is. Let's put a spotlight on this so we can see exactly how bad things are. This movie does none of that. What this movie does is...
Got no time for that.
It plays with this idea of like a good cop amidst a sea of bad cops. But even then, the good cop from Texas, he's a pretty bad cop too. Like he
steals the bad cop's Porsche.
He steals the bad cop's Porsche.
Just cause.
He's got a clean gun that he can threaten criminals with.
Oh, yeah.
And tell him he's going to throw them in the East River.
File it under DSAF.
That's right.
Doing society a favor.
The lawyer, the idealistic lawyer, he doesn't really take down the cops. Like all these cops are on the take. They're all corrupt.
But that doesn't get exposed.
It does not get exposed. This movie ends with a grenade. And the grenade blows up. The bright yellow grenade blows up this private jet. And the movie's over. And where it ends is not like, hey, we took down this corrupt system. It's like, no, you get to be a public defender again.
The big win is that his fiance miscarries.
All right.
That's like a huge win.
All right.
That's a big scene.
I know. I'm going to play you something here.
Like we're all going to sit there and be like, oh, good.
People like him belong in jail. I can't believe you want him out.
Gail, honey, I don't necessarily want him out. I just don't want him in for something he didn't do.
Who cares if he did it? If he didn't do this, he damn sure did something else. Who gives a fuck if he's innocent?
Well, I do. I give a fuck.
For Christ's sake, this man sells death to school kids.
Gail, hey, sweetie. What's going on here, huh? Come here. So what's all this about? Huh? Is this some kind of panic that I'm going to take a left turn on your dad's offer about his law firm?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah?
I just don't understand your fascination with all this.
Hey, it's all in your mind. I'll call about the apartment, I promise. I'll call tomorrow. All right?
Okay. And you love me, right?
I love you.
A lot.
Okay, so here's my thesis about this movie. This is not a movie about a corrupt system. It's not a movie about dirty cops. It's not even a courtroom drama, really. This is like a lot of other 80s movies that are preoccupied with what money will do to the soul of a man, an otherwise good man. There's so many movies in the 80s where it's like, this guy, he could be a good guy, but he's chasing the money. He's going to lose his soul chasing the money. He's otherwise idealistic. He likes Jimi Hendrix, right? So he made
very clear as he makes his little homemade orange Julius.
Yeah, he's not as racist as all of the other lawyers and cops and whatever.
He likes a funky tie, man.
He likes a funky tie, but a girl broke his heart. And after that, he's kind of lost his direction. And what he's done is he's latched himself on to a wealthy girl who has a wealthy father, and he's going to get in on some kind of he's going to get on the American dream. The American dream. He's going to be a big partner at a law firm. He's going to chase money because his heart is broken. What ends up happening is that girl, that old flame, comes back into his life, and he gets his bearings again. And he decides, I don't need the money. I'm actually good at public defending, and that is what I'm going to do with my life. And that's sort of like the indicator at the end. It's like, oh, she was faking the pregnancy? Forget that. I am absolutely going to go back to public defending. The corrupt system is going to remain corrupt, but at least this one honest lawyer in New York City gets to embrace the idealism of the law again. And I think you could say that about a lot of 80s movies. There's something about this worry that we've lost the ideals of the 60s and 70s, and the 80s are all about money. It's all about materialism. And we need our hero to learn that at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely that, right? Like, he returns back to from whence he came, and it's very bookended scene where he's back in the trenches, going to see another client, and that is juxtaposed with the lavish dinner setting where I guess where they were going to be talking engagement stuff, I think is what it was, right? And
where she reveals either was a miscarriage or the pregnancy was a fake, but whatever the case is, she
says the rabbit didn't die, and so but she announces that I think she announces she lost the baby, right? Because I think both are like, I think one is implied, right?
Because she just told him that she was never pregnant in the first place.
Because she said I didn't want to lose you. Yeah. So she was going to entrap. So then she tells so rather than say that, she tells everybody that they lost the baby, and then so he's looking around and he's like, well, dude, I'm out. And so like he basically gets up to make an announcement like during this whole thing. So from their perspective, she just announced that they lost the baby, and he's like, yeah, I'm leaving you. I mean, that's a wild dinner party, dude. That's like thinking you're on a roller coaster and then it just launches off and kills you.
But what do you think about my thesis that this is pretty typical to 80s movies? That it's like it has to have some kind of commentary on the financial state of the country.
Well, I think, and yes, and I think you're absolutely right, and I think you hit the nail on the head too when you specified a man losing his soul. That's right. A man, because it is the female characters in this movie are not they're not strong. They are not. I mean, they're okay. One, his old flame is the assistant DA, but they have this whole like argument out because like he hasn't told his fiance about wanting to leave her and all this stuff. And then so basically she gives him some big lecture that's like all about him. It's all about, hey, you have to do what you have. Like she doesn't even, she's nothing really in this conversation. It's not about how she feels or about how she's being treated. It's all about like him, like he becomes the center point of even her life, and him doing the right thing for him is really important. And then so we get the other painted picture of this fiance who, you know, okay, we find out she doesn't know who Jimi Hendrix is, so that's weird. And then she fakes a pregnancy, and then they have that scene that you just played where like she's not wrong from like a moral standpoint. Like she is with a guy.
I don't think
that
she
is
quite
going
understands the idea of a public defender. Like
right,
what
which is also a weird
does.
thing because you're gonna marry him and you don't know what he does. But I mean, so her reaction to this was like it could have been like a real nice learning moment for the two of them, right? Mm-hmm. Where they could say, "Is this really? Are we compatible?" Knowing that this is my job. At least at this moment, and you may see that this is I'm setting a villainous person free based on the technicalities of law, and then it just sort of gives her one of these "you're being hysterical" moments.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Very
and it's like, or maybe you're just upset because you don't think that I'm going to take that job from your dad. Is that what this is really about? And then she's written to just play right along with it. Well, maybe, and that's
it's all in your mind, man.
And it's all in your mind. And that's where Weller, like this is going back to what you're talking about with Weller. I think Weller can take material that might be a little questionable and just. He's pretty earnest about the characters he plays, and I think he pours a little bit into it.
I think he's too good for this movie. It's actually a pretty legitimately great acting performance in this movie.
Well, and so you say he's too good for this movie. I think it's a blessing because this is a movie that, like, if you don't have a Weller performance, well, first off, Sam Elliott also. I mean, Sam Elliott's not necessarily playing off type. But like if you had cast any other two people in this that were maybe like B grade or whatever, no one cares.
See,
you know what I mean?
I think maybe we've already solved this. I think that early on we discovered that this is really like 4 different genres of movie put together.
Right.
I think that at least one of the movies that this filmmaker is trying to make is really helped by Peter Weller.
Well, I think I could have watched all 4 of these movies, right? Because I think Peter Weller, in sort of as like sort of a ragtag, rock and roll type lawyer, is interesting. I thought it was interesting. I actually liked his performance in the courtroom quite a bit. I found it to be authentic. I love it when he was like completely disheveled and still just nailing it. You know, I mean, I really liked that. I like the. Sort of this, I like watching a Sam Elliott as like a good cop, but not necessarily a pure cop. Working amongst the sea of mulleted bad cops. He's not a good cop. He's not on the tape.
He's not on the tape, but he's absolutely a bad cop because being from Texas, he doesn't understand the concept of a skyrise. Because being on the 13th floor, he doesn't quite get that. You can't play fetch with the dog when the window's open.
Right. There's a lot of things about heights he clearly doesn't understand, right? Like, I mean, he hangs onto a plane flying through the air. I don't think he understands. He might have depth perception issues, right? And so
his mustache is obstructing his vision.
That's what it is. There's another movie I want to watch though, where it's just Peter Weller and Sam Elliott on motorcycles shooting. I mean, it's crazy. Like, what is their relationship? Because at the end of the courtroom situation, right? Like, the guy gets found innocent of murdering a cop necessarily, and then it's like, okay, great. And then he just books it out of there. And then Sam Elliott's waiting for him with the Porsche that he stole from the cop that was killed. And it's like, you want to drive or you want to shoot? I'm like, you're the cop. Why does the lawyer have the option? Why are you waiting for him anyway? What is he?
He's from Texas,
whole sequence. It's so great where he's just like, man, I hope he wraps up this trial soon. I just found out. Like, no, go get him. You ever waited for anybody in court or for any kind of proceeding? You don't know when it's going to end. And he's just you want to drive or you want to shoot? How about let the cops shoot?
In Texas, the lawyers drive or shoot. They don't do both.
That's amazing.
It's a state law.
And there's so many other ways that I felt like they could have stopped them from flying. I don't know.
All right, let's move on to the. Is there one tweak that you would make to this movie to improve it?
I think the easy tweak would just be like, pick a lane, right? That's not like a slight tweak, but I think I would want a little more. I mean, honestly, I loved the whole crane sequence, but like even just a voiceover at one point going, "I can't stop this crane," just something. Because it did take me a long time. I'm like, is the crane guy in on this? And then there's like, oh no, it's just he's really, really bad at his job.
How many cabs has he picked up that day?
Right.
It's just Tuesday. It's only been 4 cabs.
I mean, maybe a little more Sam Elliott. Maybe I think would be.
I think more Sam Elliott for sure. I was gonna say this movie is a little bit like one good white guy in the midst of a lot of racists, and this is sort of we're supposed to read his lack of racism as, oh well, he's a nice guy, and then at the end, because of course the dirty cop hates rap music, right?
Right.
And then immediately,
which by the way was Red Hot Chili Peppers. Okay, so let's all settle down.
And then immediately we go to Weller's apartment where he's making a shake. Wait, no, it's like a smoothie or something?
Yeah, like orange Julius with a little bit of instant Folgers.
It was like milk, orange juice, egg, and Maxwell House.
Oh yeah, Maxwell House. Yeah, good. Yeah.
So again, I'm not sure how good this guy is, but he likes Jimi Hendrix. He's even got like a Jimi Hendrix poster. So you're thinking, oh, well, he's not racist because he can't be racist. Of course, he likes Jimi Hendrix, right? But then at the end of the movie, they try to show that he's morally superior to his client. Stand up and face me. Like, there's a little bit of white superiority in this at the end. So I feel like you didn't need that, and it almost. Like if you're going to make everyone in this movie dirty, then do that. But don't try to make this one guy like this is the one non-racist guy in all of New York City.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from the racism perspective, sure, he is. I mean, he is a guy that spends a good chunk of this movie cheating on his fiance. So in terms of
his fiance is pretty bad.
In terms of heart of gold, yeah, but he doesn't know. The thing is, he doesn't know she's faking the pregnancy. In fact, he thinks she's pregnant while he's still actively cheating on her. So, I mean, just keep that in mind.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, he's probably just engaged to her for the money anyway, right?
So also, maybe not good. Which I think is good. I think it's good to have some flawed main characters, but it does seem a little inconsistent in how they're trying to portray him.
I think so. Because
I think the way that the movie is designed, and this might be going back to some of the maybe the latent misogyny that's in it, or maybe not latent, but apparent, is that like we're supposed to, I think, be okay with the fact that he's with his infidelity because
that's his old flame, right?
Because he's. And it's ultimately what we are supposed to believe is best for him. So kind of consequences be damned because he's the center of this universe.
Well, we don't want to see him marry for money, right?
Right. I guess.
So is there a trope, a cliche, or a device that you enjoyed in this film?
Sam Elliott's mustache.
Does he not have I was rewatching a few scenes Roadhouse, and it looks like he's not wearing the mustache in Roadhouse.
It's just not as prominent. It's for sure there. I've seen him without his mustache. It's unsettling.
Is this movie better, worse, or on par with a Ron Howard movie?
This is probably the toughest question, and I'll tell you why. Because I think Ron Howard makes a more cohesive film. And probably leans way more into the courtroom drama and maybe some of the relationship issues. but I don't get a roller coaster, and I don't get a near 9/11. So it's a real tough one, because of the four movies, I think two of them are maybe three of them are a Howard -4, but there's one that's a Howard +3, you know.
Yeah, I gotta say this is a Howard -3. I think Howard picks a lane. It's interesting. Like, I think, what was his film debut, directorial debut? It was the one with Winkler and Michael Keaton.
With Night Shift?
Night Shift. That's sort of a New York City. I mean, they're corrupt corners and pimps.
Sure.
But it is kind of like that wacky after dark New York movie. So we know he can do something along those lines.
Right.
But pick a lane.
What's his grittiest movie?
Howard's grittiest movie.
Because I don't know if he really does gritty, right?
That's a great question.
Because, I mean, I'm looking at it, I mean, is it Backdraft? Ransom, perhaps?
You know what? Maybe Ransom, in a way. But, Night Shift, it's about corners turned pimps. There's prostitutes. I mean, that's pretty gritty.
In terms of, like, it's a gritty comedy, yeah. Yeah, so the thing is that I don't know we have a real good, grit comparison.
I think Night Shift is analogous, at least.
Well, then this movie's better than Night Shift. So then I'm gonna stand by. It's a mixed bag. Because I mean, now if you give me Henry Winkler killing somebody on a merry-go-round in Night Shift, we can talk.
Is there a one to grow on half the battle moment in this film?
Stick with the sax. Don't follow your dreams.
I was going to say, you can't trust anyone who's ever fallen in love with the saxophone.
Let's just be honest. If there's one to grow on, if you're at someone's apartment for the first time, check for open windows.
Especially if you're going to play catch with their dog.
Threw it harder. Like, he doesn't know the layout of this apartment at all.
How about close your windows when it's raining? If it's
you're already true. Thank you. Yeah, you're already risking knocking over a blender by throwing it harder into a room you're not aware of what's going on.
A little bit of feedback for you, Steve.
Alrighty.
This was not sent to our regular email account, which is cocoonsofhorror@gmail.com. But I got an email, and it has some really nice things to say about you, Steve.
Those are some of my favorites.
Yeah, this is from JJ. He says, unironically, when Steve really gets impressed, is there anyone who can incisively encapsulate what unique, unnoticed element caught his attention, why, and how it does this more brilliantly or passionately better than he does? I don't think so. People that are funny are inevitably brilliant. Hey?
Wow.
So I think that's a really nice email.
Is this me trying to wax poetic about Howard the Duck?
It must be. But I like this, and I wanted to call this out because I think that in general, when we get reviews or emails that compliment you, they really kind of focus on your sense of humor, which is not you're a stand-up comedian. You probably do care about that.
Sure.
Maybe more than most. But I think that this person has said something true about you. I don't think that this podcast works unless you're bringing something to the table intellectually. And I agree with this guy. And that is all I have to say about that.
Well, that's interesting because you, on my end, you completely cut out.
Well, I was just saying a lot of really nice things, and you'll never hear them. Since you do not listen to this podcast, you'll never hear what I just said.
This one I may actually tune into because you've got a great teaser.
In a cocoon of horror,